So we're going to get started today. I know there's still a few people trickling in. It was like this in my first class today too. I think people are enjoying the long weekend. So anyway, we're going to spend some time today working on organic shapes. And it's really the first time that we've dealt with non-orthogonal shapes. And there's a set of tools that are a little bit different than what we've been doing. And we'll kind of manipulate. We're going to create pillows and cushions and drapes and curtains and that kind of thing today. And that's kind of the beginning of the fun stuff that we really get to do. So I'm going to walk you through a bunch of samples today. You're going to be creating samples in your exercise 209 to turn in. Like Angie asked, you don't need to turn in a zip file. You just need to give me a JPEG of the rendering. That's really what I'm concerned with in terms of marking you off and checking the boxes. The assignment 201, your table and share, is definitely posted. I had an error that I caught last week on it, but it's due on the 8th, I think. I just want to make sure I get the date correct. Hold on a second. It is due on March 8th at midnight. So that's there. I wanted to make sure that I reminded you and posted, told you guys to go look at it. It's still a ways out, so I don't think it's really impacting anybody yet. However, when you're starting to think about what kind of a cushion or a chair you want to be creating, or what kind of a chair or a table, the cushions may play a role in that. And so it's certainly something that you might want to pay attention to today. So let me get set up here. I'm going to share my screen. And then I have to arrange Zoom, so bear with me for just a second here. And I just realized my microphone's not clipped correctly, so hopefully you can all hear me during that. Maybe that's a little bit better. All right, so we're going to get started with your exercise 209. And really what today is about is creating these organic shapes. And thus far, everything we've started with has been very rectangular. So I've gone ahead and I've opened up Rhino. I have a brand new file. When I created the new file, I used the large object inches template. So I went here and I said, I want large object inches. And I went ahead and said, OK. And I can confirm that it's inches by looking down here at the bottom of my tray, and it says inches, so that's perfect. And we'll work in the perspective view primarily today. And I'm going to start by creating kind of like a couch cushion. We're going to do two styles of cushions, and then we'll do some curtains and what have you. But when I start thinking about a couch cushion, a lot of times what people do is they'll start with the basic box and try to modify the box into its shape. So let's say I did, this is 24 by 18 by 6 inches high. So they start with something like this, and then they say, oh, well, let me kind of round over the edges and soften this up. But in all reality, it rarely turns out to look like a truly organic cushion. And so we want to recreate this in a little bit different method. I'm going to start similarly. I'm going to use the rectangle tool, and this is going to create curves, not surfaces. We're going to start with some guide curves. So let me once again start at 0.00. So I've typed in 00. And so this is going to be at 24, 18. And that creates this kind of rectangle here. Now, the first thing as I start to think about this is in plan view, a cushion really doesn't come to these precise points on the corner. Kind of ends up being a little bit rounded. And so thus far in the class, we have done like fillets where we've rounded over the corner. The problem is when we do that in this scenario, it ends up creating separate line segments in the corners. And we really want to stick with just a similar line. So let me explode this. So I'll start by typing explode. I could also go up to edit and explode right there. And that then breaks this into individual lines. So I have 4 individual lines. I'm going to take this side line here, and I'm going to rebuild that. I can go to edit and then rebuild. Alternatively, I could type in rebuild. And when I do that, you see that my control points have now changed pretty dramatically. So I used to have just 2 control points, and we can see that in this rebuild dialog box here. Under point count, the number in parentheses is the number of existing points. So right now there was just 2 points. It was a straight line between 2 points. Now, when I rebuild that, generally you're rebuilding it in some odd module. I could start with 3, and that's going to give me a point in the middle and 2 points on the sides. I could bump that up, let's say 5, for example, and I get a few more points. We could go all the way up to, I think it was 10, and that gives me a lot more points to control. Similarly, the degree, a 1-degree curve is a straight line, a 2-degree can curve in 2 directions, and a 3-degree can curve in 3 directions. It doesn't really matter for our purposes right now, whether it's a 2 or a 3 directional curve. I'm going to leave that at 10, and I'll go ahead and say OK. And there's my line. Let me rebuild this line. So same thing, I'm going to type in rebuild, and we can rebuild it by 10 again. And we'll go ahead and say, OK. I'll rebuild this line. And that gives me those. And I'll rebuild this one. And so by rebuilding, I'm essentially breaking this into more control. So I could take any one of these points and I can move that point, and it's going to affect the line as a whole. But what I want to do is I want to show the control points for all of them at once. So let's take all the lines and select them. And then I'm going to come over here, and there's 2 control point toggles. One shows the object control points, and the other shows the curve edit points. The curve edit points, I think, works a little bit better because they're points actually on the curve as opposed to the control points. I'm going to switch my view into the top view here. And I'm going to modify. Oh, Lola just gave me a message. I missed her today. All right, well, it sounds like she's going to come back. Naomi, the size of the rectangle is 18 by 24, though any size will work. Okay, so I'm going to select the corner point right here. And it's actually 2 corner points. It's one from each curve. And then I can actually move that control point. I'm typing move. I can move. Let me turn off my ortho here. And I can move that to kind of soften the corner. So I'm rounding over the corner like that. Notice that when I do that, it bulges out just a little bit as we create that corner. And that's more of what a real cushion does. And you guys are going to spend a lot more time now that you're creating this looking at what real cushions do. So you're going to go home and look at your couch and say, what does this really look like? Because a lot of learning how to model these organic shapes is observing the world. So let me take this one. I'm going to move this. We'll soften that up a little bit. Now, if you didn't want the corners to be this soft, you could rebuild the curves at a higher level than 10. So I could rebuild at 20, and the curve wouldn't be as rounded for these cushions. For our purposes, they're reasonable. Now, I also have the opportunity to manipulate any of these curves along the side. I could, for example, take these center curves or these center points, and I could push them out just a little bit, which deepens that swoop. Take these 2 and we'll do the same. And again, a lot of this starts to come from observation. What do these cushions really look like? So let's go with that for right now. I'm going to hit escape twice, which will get rid of all my control points. Now, if I look at these curves that I've created, it's still a curve, but this is far from the rectangle that we started with. So now that I have those kind of defined here, I'm going to copy those vertically. So let's go into the perspective view. I'm going to take all these curves. I'm going to go up to edit and then copy, or excuse me, transform and then copy. I want to choose vertical. So I'll click on vertical or type V for vertical. And we're going to go up by, 4 or 6 inches. Let's go up by 4 inches. And that gives me a copy of the curve that I started with, which is good. And sorry, my Zoom just had some issues. Okay, Lola just came back. I know she wants to make a quick announcement. So I'm going to pause what I'm working on. I'll let her do her announcement and then we'll come back to it. Before I do that, however, I am going to save my work. So let's go to File and then Save. And I'll make sure that this is saved. I'll do it while she's doing her announcement, but I just want to remind you that that's always something that's really important. Let me stop my share. And Lola, you can go ahead and take over.
I'm so sorry to interrupt. I've been having so many tech issues today. And yes, save. I can't tell you how important it is and how many hours of work I've lost because I didn't save stupid projects. So please, if you can drill it into your brain, save your projects like every 10 minutes. Sorry. Let me see here.
The sharing should be enabled for you, Lola.
Yes. Yeah, my computer's being mean to me the past couple days. So, so this week for the Spring Architecture Lecture Series, we have Allison Yaris coming from Nolan Tam Architects. Allison Yaris has been the Associate Principal at Nolan Tam for over 20 years, and she's bringing a very unique perspective to the lecture this week. She takes on very unique projects. She has her areas of expertise in the animal care sector, in library design, and historic renovation. So, you know, she will be able to talk about facilities and projects that are kind of more out there, are kind of more interesting or unique, you know, versus like a house or a skyscraper or something. And then she's also been, you know, the project manager on multiple award-winning projects. So very, very accomplished. This is a quote that is funny. She's very creative, interesting personality. So you can go to her website and see that quote. So this is the Oakland Zoo, California Trail, won a bunch of awards. I thought this was a cool picture. You can see all the bison, and also it's the same building that's here in this first picture. It has a gondola that goes to it, and it has a view of the entire bay. This is the veterinary hospital at the Oakland Zoo as well. So a lot of work with animals of all types. And this is the Half Moon Bay Library. It won a bunch of awards. This is the Berkeley Teen Center, also many awards. So yes, it's going to be tomorrow night, February 24th at 6 p.m. And yeah, so I hope to see all of you there. I'm going to link the Zoom link in the chat. It's free. Log on, come listen, ask questions. It'll be wonderful. Okay.
Thank you, Lola, for coming and telling. I missed Go this morning, so I wasn't sure that you were going to be here. I would have held off a little longer, so I apologize.
No, that's just fine. I guess something must have happened.
Yeah, it's okay. It happens. No worries.
Yeah.
I figured you would, and then when he didn't show up, I was like, oh, maybe they canceled it or something. So anyway,
yeah.
It's no problem. But I apologize for having you have to come back.
No, I apologize for being late.
Nah, it's no worries.
Okay, have a great class, everybody. Thanks for letting me butt in. Okay, bye-bye.
All right, so we're going to go back to it. Let me get my share back up here. Okay, so I did successfully save it. That's good. And what I did is I copied my second curve up on top. And so these are two identical curves. And based on what we've been doing, I certainly could take these two curves like that, and I could loft them together, and I'd create a surface. Well, and that's an improvement, but it's not really great yet. So let's keep working on it. I'm going to delete that for right now. When we start to think about this, we also want to think about what's happening on the top versus what's happening on the bottom. And so in this scenario, maybe the top has some different variance. Maybe the top, the sides are pushed out a little bit more. So we don't want these to necessarily be identical to the bottom. So we may make some adjustments. And I can make them individually. I could also, make some uneven deformations. They don't have to be symmetrical. So that one might arc out a little bit. Maybe this one and this come in just a little bit. Maybe like that. But the other thing I can do is these are perfectly flat right now. If we were to look at them, they're perfectly flat. But I can start to mess with the vertical orientation of these. So if we imagine somebody sitting in this seat, for example, maybe there's a depression from two legs that typically sit in this cushion. So I might adjust these down just a little bit. So let's move them. I'm going to type in V for vertical, and I'll drop those two down just a bit. So if we start to look at this in profile, it has a little bit of a dip where those seats or those legs used to be sitting. So we start to make those kinds of modifications. You know, maybe this back got pushed up a little bit because of people sitting in the stuffing. So I could take these three, for example, and I can move them vertically up just a little bit. So you start to tweak these settings based on what you perceive a cushion to look like. And again, this is where when you go home today, or when you go out and take your break and you go sit on the couch, pay attention to what your couch looks like. Not all couches are like this. I mean, I'm doing one that's a little bit more broken down than a brand new couch, and certainly you could get away with it. But this is about how we start to create these shapes. So I could build out this using these curves as a surface, but I'd really like a finer level of control. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add another curve. I'm going to go in here to my polyline. I'm going to turn on my midpoint snap, and I'm going to go from the middle of this curve, there it is, across to the middle of this curve. And I'll hit enter. So this new curve ends right on top of this existing curve on either side, and that's important. I'm going to take this curve and I'm going to rebuild it again. So I typed in rebuild. We'll rebuild it by 10. And this time, maybe I'm going to move all of these points down. Let's do everything in the middle there. Let's move vertically down a little bit. And then maybe I will, maybe I'll take this point and that point and really move those down. Let's move them vertically, and we'll drop those even further. So I'm kind of creating a profile of what the inside of this cushion should look like. Likewise, I could also draw a line that goes from the middle in this direction. Now the key here, though, is that I really need it to meet at this point and then continue to that point. So if I do that, and so I have two straight line segments, I can do one of two things. If I just rebuild it as it is, rebuild, helps if I can type. I have to make sure that one of these points is lined up directly on that line before I start manipulating. So let me snap 2 points. There's point. I can snap to that point, and I have to make sure that that one stays right on that midpoint. And if we zoom in, you can see that they're not quite intersecting. So it's very important that I keep those points on themselves. Actually, sorry, I need to turn the actual control points on. This one, the curve edit points, and I need to move that one because I need to be able to move the exact curve so that they are on top of each other. There it is. So those have to intersect. Now I can manipulate these other points. So let's take these. Let's move them vertically. We can drop them down a little bit more. Oops. Come on, not that far. There we go. Let's take this middle one and drop that one down even a little bit more. Move vertical, down even a little bit more. And now I might be over exaggerating this a little bit, but you can see that what I've done is I've created some profiles that I'd like to follow. I'd like to have my surface follow these profiles. So now comes the big ticket item of what we're covering today, and that is something called a network surface or a curved network. This one's kind of confusing because it's available under surface and then curved network. But if you type the command in, it's reversed. It's network surface. So go figure why they have them different. But we're going to choose curved network, and it's going to ask me to select the curves in the network. Now, when you create these curves, you're looking for curves that are generally going in the same direction and then ones going perpendicular to that direction. So in this case, I have a curve that's going this direction. I have a curve that's going this direction, and I have a curve that's going this direction. Likewise, I have a curve that's going roughly 90 degrees to it, roughly perpendicular. I have this curve that's going in that direction, and I have this curve that's going in that direction. So that grouping of curves, it's not an actual group, but that selection, when I hit enter, the curve network is going to build a surface on those profiles. So I'm going to go ahead and say okay. And you can see that the surface that it created has a depression in it. So it has the depression for the two legs. It has a little bit of a depression for the rear end. And that's starting to create a more natural formed cushion. If I didn't, let me delete that surface for a second. If I just use these 1, 2, 3, and 4 and did the network surface, you can see that it's far less exciting. It's got a little bit to it, but it doesn't nearly have the depressions. So it depends on what you're after in the overall piece. So once again, let me do that network surface again. So surface and then curve network, or I type in network SRF. 1, 2, 3. I'm holding down shift. And 1, 2, 3. Oops, I missed one. Let's go back and grab that. The order actually doesn't matter, but and that then builds out this curve network. Let me say okay here. If, let's hide this for now. If these 2 points didn't line up, if these curves didn't line up, if I took these points and moved them up so that we didn't have a cross in the middle, and I went to do the curve network, it would have a hard time. So let's select those curves again. Curve network. And it was able to do it, but it's going to average out what's happening in the middle. So see how the surface ends up between those two? It's not exactly on the profile. So that's fine, but it's something to be aware of when you're creating these surfaces. So let's go ahead and delete this. Let's show my old surface. Oops, there it is. And so that's my overall surface. So I can repeat this process in the corners. So let's do a line straight up in the corners like that. Let's do a line straight up in this corner. There to there. Let me take these two curves. Let me rebuild them. I'm not going to rebuild them by 10 because I don't need that many control points. Let's rebuild them by 3. And I'll go ahead and say okay. And then I can take this point here and I can move it ever so slightly out. So we want to move it kind of in a diagonal away. So it's pillowing out just a little bit. Let's take this one. Same thing. Let me take this point and we'll move it out and away like that. So now I have this plus that one and that one, and I can do the same thing. Network surface. Oops. I'll say okay, and that's then creating that part of the cushion. If I wanted to enhance the profile a little bit more, I can add any number of curves. So I could come along here, and it doesn't have to be at the middle. I just need it to make sure it snaps. I'm going to turn on near snap, though I'm generally not a huge fan of it because I think it can get you a little lost. I'm going to do it in this case. There's one, and let me repeat my polyline, and I'm going to go right there, down to right there. Oops, let me do that one more time. I forgot to hit enter. I'll hit enter, and let me take these two, rebuild them, and then I'll take these center points, but not, let me hold down control so I can deselect that. Oh. I'm going to have to turn these points on. The key commands for me on a Mac don't always work. So let me show my points. And show my points. So I can actually select these points. There we go. I'm going to move them. And what I'm thinking about is that if somebody was sitting in this seat, they'd be putting weight up here and it would cause some pillowing to happen right here. And maybe that pillowing wouldn't be as severe in the middle. So I could come back here. There's midpoint. Brooks asking, can the mesh part of the network surface be manipulated? Yes and no, to answer your question. Yes, we can manipulate it, but it's not as easy as manipulating the lines and then recreating the surface. That's a much easier method of going about this. So let me go ahead and select all of these curves this time. So those are all in one direction. I'm looking for, or those are all in this direction. I'm looking for the two curves that are going in the opposite direction that are not the big surface up here. And it's really probably not going to let me. It's really not helping me here. Let me try that one more time. I'm sorry. There they all are. I can do a network surface of this front. And now that's starting to pillow out a little bit more in those locations. So I'm not going to make you watch me do the rest of it. We'll do the rest of it relatively simple, though you'll spend a little bit more time customizing. I'm going to create these verticals. And then the remaining sides, I'm going to stick with kind of the basics. I just want to make sure we get through everything I want to get through today. So there's those 4. And there's our curve network. There's 1. Oops. Come on. It's killing me. There's another one, network surface. And then we'll come over to this last one here. I'll say okay. And one last one at the very bottom. This one's actually easier as long as I do my selection correct. I can just take this whole thing at the bottom and do a curve network there as well. And so as a result, when I start to get this, I'm ending up with a cushion that's far from my original design. It's not a box anymore. It has rounded corners. And in this scenario, it has kind of a sharp edge on this top corner as it goes around. And that's the design of this particular cushion. If I wanted to round that more, right, I could change this curve here and rebuild it so that it has maybe 10 sections and do the same thing that I did with the corners right there where I rounded around those corners. I could round around these corners. So you can definitely get there with more and more levels of detail. But the other option would be to put a little bit of piping around. And a lot of times this happens in fabric where it hides the seam. So you might do a circle. Let's do the diameter of the circle at 1/4 of an inch. So now this circle is flat right now. So it's laying flat. I need to rotate it up in 3 dimensions. So I'm going to do a rotate 3D. My angle is off, so it's hard to see. I'm going to hold down Shift so that I'm going off in space here. There it is. And we'll fold that one up. So now it's at least standing upright, but I also need to rotate it. So I'm going to go to rotate. We'll go right from the center here, and it's about 45 degrees to get it perpendicular to where my curve would be. So I have it like that. Now I have my cross-sectional curve and I have a rail. So we've already done sweeps before. So this is a sweep 1. That's my rail. That's my cross-sectional curve. I can hit enter, and it's going to build that piece of piping for me, like that. Now, in this scenario, maybe the piping, I want it to go all the way around. We can try and see if I can get it to go all the way around. It doesn't always work. It depends on how rounded the corners are. So if I take all 4 of these curves that go around the edge like that, and I join them, then I can do my sweep 1. And my sweep shape is that little circle right there. I can hit enter. There's my seam. And there's my overall little piping that goes around. And if I look at the corners, there's a few little issues at the corners, but by the time I went and rendered it, it would probably end up being, okay, there's a little bit of an error there. Yeah, it's reasonable. The sharper the corners come together, the harder the rendering is going to be. So at this point, it would be a matter of applying my materials. So I go into V-Ray, and of course, I haven't downloaded the materials yet. So we need to download the materials. I'll start that process, and then we'll come back to this. And then we can apply our materials and do our rendering of it. So let's talk about other styles of pillows that you might want to make. So that was the first style. What about like a throw pillow that you would go on the back of the couch? Well, we can make it in kind of a similar way. Let me come over here. Let's draw a rectangle. Let's say at 12 by 12. And again, these numbers are really arbitrary. This is about learning today, and it's not necessarily about doing exactly what I'm saying. I'm just trying to show you how you would go about doing this. So let's take this and let's rebuild it, or excuse me, let's explode it. And then we'll rebuild each side. And I think this time, let's do it by 7. It's a little bit smaller. We'll say, okay. Let's show our point. And this then is how tight of a corner do we want? Do we want it with a rounded corner? Do we want it to come to a point? I'll do the rounded corners again. So let's move this in just a little bit. And maybe I won't round it completely off. We'll leave it a little bit. Oops. Sometimes it might be easier to do this in the top view as well, because you can kind of see it a little bit better. So let's leave it with a little bit of a point on it, but all right, so I've done that. Now maybe on this, you want to have, you know how sometimes those pillows have a dent in the top? So let's go to move, and let's move this one down a little bit more so it has a little bit of a dent in the top. And so this time we have a rather nice kind of object set up, but I don't want to make a copy of this object because that would make it thick. It kind of comes to a point at the edges here. So what I'll do is I'll draw a diagonal from this corner to this corner, and then I'll draw another diagonal from this corner to this corner. Now I could also, and this is certainly an option, I could draw lines across the middle, and that would achieve a very similar effect. And actually, maybe I'll do both so that you can see how they're different. So let's copy this before I get too far, and we'll move it right over there. All right, so one of these, we will do 2 diagonals. And the other one, we'll do one this way and one this way. And so this is going to change the look of the pillow a little bit in terms of how it's created. So let's take these 2 and let's rebuild them. And let's rebuild them by, yeah, 7 will work. Let's do 10. No, let's do 7. Say, okay. Let's show our points. There they are. And so I'm going to take all the points in the middle, not the corners, just the points in the middle here. And we'll move them vertically. Let's pull those up a little bit. Sorry, I'm getting weird snapping here. Let's go about like that. Then I need to take the next grouping of points. We'll move them again vertically. Like that. And then we'll select the last 2 points here, and we'll move them up. Oops. I didn't type vertical. Move, vertical. What? Move, vertical. And it is not doing a good job for me here. There we go. So I moved them up like that. So in this scenario, I've created these 2 curves. But if I look at my curves, right, I have a curve going in this direction, and I have a curve going in this direction, and I have obviously a curve going here and here, but I no longer, these curves are going on a diagonal. So if I did my curve network, I'd get an error. So if I selected all of this like that, and I went up to surface, curve network, I get this error. Unable to sort curves. Please select curves one at a time. Even if I selected them one at a time, it still wouldn't work. I need to conceive of this as curves going generally in one direction and curves going generally in the other direction. So these, I don't want to break these apart. But if I took this curve, for example, and I joined it to this curve, so I'm going to type join, that curve, and then I took these 2 and joined them. In this scenario, I generally have one curve there, there, and there that are all roughly going diagonally this way. And this curve is distinctly going opposite. That grouping, if I went into my curve network, I'd be able to actually make an overall surface. So in this scenario, I'd mirror this surface to create the backside of the pillow. So let's go mirror. And my mirror line, I don't want to do it that way. So I need to switch my view so that I'm down here in like the front view. Let's turn on ortho so that my mirror is happening across the XY plane. And that then gives me that pillow where they come together. You could still do beading around the edge if you wanted to. You don't have to. And I could certainly deform this pillow a little bit more. And since I'm here, let's go ahead and join these 2 together. Like that. So they're one surface at this point. Oops. Why didn't it join them? Yeah, there we go. Now it's one surface. Now I said I would look at this selection of curves as a little bit different. Let's oops, sorry. I wanted to zoom selected so that I'm recentered on this view. Okay. So this one, I still have to rebuild these 2 middle curves. And we'll say, okay, I'll show my points again. And there they are. So I would be doing roughly the same thing with these points. I'm going to take all of those inner curves and I'd move them up. So we move them up like this. Then I take the next grouping of inner curves, move V for vertical. And then I take these last 2 in the center, move V for vertical. Right about like that. So in this scenario, the curves are a little bit different. I would be picking these 3 in one direction and these 3 in the other direction. And then I can go up to my surface curve network, and I'd make the pillow in that way. Now, I didn't exaggerate the stuffing quite as much, but you guys get the idea. It's just a different method, and there's nothing wrong with this method in terms of how you create it. Let me mirror it. Remember, I have to switch my view so that I can get it to flip down. There it is. And then I would take those 2 and I would join them together as well. Now, these are obviously laying flat. So, in an ideal world, I'd rotate 3D. Oops. Come on. Turn on ortho. Oh, it is on. And this also might be a place for the gumball. We worked on this a little bit because you can kind of manually manipulate. Oops. Let me turn off ortho now. We can tip it back just a little bit. We can rotate it this way just a little bit, just to kind of see what that pillow would look like. Likewise, this one, we could do the same thing. So let's rotate it up. Too far. Come on, zoom. Now let's move this up. Move it back. Side. A little bit more forward. I don't know, something like that. And then we can see those 2 pillows together. So I was able to create those 2 pillows. Different styles, but it would still work. Now, I need to apply materials to these. So on any one of these, I can open up my asset editor and apply materials. But sometimes it's easier to set up your pillows on layers and what have you. So let's go ahead and let's say this is my throw pillow. And maybe I want a sublayer for pillow 1 and a sublayer for pillow 2. And so then I could take this and I'm going to right click on pillow 1 and say change object layer. I can take this pillow, right click on pillow 2 and say change object layer. Likewise, I could do a layer for couch, and I could do a sub layer for couch base or something like that. And this would go on that layer. So we could change, right click, change object layer, and that would go on that layer. So I'm just trying to get a little bit organized here. Then we could go into our materials and we could go into fabric. We say, okay, well, there's a lot of, here's some different fabrics. There's a purple. Let's put that one on one of these. So let's right click and say add to scene. And then we can right click on it and say apply to layer. Let's go pillow 1. And let's pick this gray one here. We'll right click and say add to scene. And let's right click and say apply to layer pillow 2. And maybe, sure, we'll use this one as my couch. Let's add to scene. We'll right click, apply to layer. It's going to be the couch base. So I've applied all of those materials. It wouldn't hurt to double check. So if I went into my rendered mode, we could check what the look looks like here. So we may need to do some texture mapping, which isn't really a surprise. So on this one, our texture mapping, let's go ahead and go into our properties. Let's go into our texture mapping. And really, this one could be a bit challenging. A box isn't really relevant. I would say a planar mapping or a surface mapping are probably best. I'm going to do a surface mapping on it. And I need my UVW repeat to go up, let's say maybe to 3. So I locked those and I went up, and now let's take a look at it. It's not too bad. We could go a little bit more. Maybe it's at 4, like that. Same thing here. I think a surface mapping is probably best, and my UVW repeat probably needs to go. Let's lock them to 4 or so as well. And now we're starting to see that one a little bit better. I don't think that one turned out quite as good as this one did, partly because the edges are just too sharp. Pillows don't have that sharp of an edge. They need to be more stuffed like this one. Let's look at this one. So in this one, a box mapping is probably closer to the shape. So let's select everything except maybe this piece that goes around. So let's say all of these surfaces. All right, so I've got all those surfaces. Let's apply a box map to it. We'll come up here and we'll say, yes, let's do a bounding box. World coordinates, go ahead and cap it. And then our x equals y equals z repeat is probably at least 3. And now we can start to see it. It's not bad. This seems a little bit stretched. Let's take all 4 of those. And let's come down here and let's do x equals y equals z there. See if that evens it out, which it should. Yeah, there we go. So our material is pretty well applied. This one is tough, and there's no real way around it. I think probably a cylindrical mapping would be best. So I'm going to do a cylindrical map. We can do a bounding box, that's fine. And we'll do the world, but it's going to be going the wrong direction, I believe. So let's show the mapping using our show mapping widget. Yeah, it's really long and skinny, so we need to change that orientation. So let's rotate it. I'm going to use the gumball again when we select it. Come on, let me see the mapping. Oh, sorry, I didn't capped. Yes. All right, let's try it one more time. Let's show the mapping. And we need to go in this direction like that. And unfortunately, it's just really, really long and skinny. So we need to pull this one down so that it's not so long and skinny. Not quite that. Zoom in a little bit more. And this needs to make sure, we need to make sure we're in the middle of it. Nope, and we're not. So like I said, this one takes a little bit of work to get right. That's not too bad from a look standpoint. So that, like I said, is the hardest one to get correct. I'm not going to have you waste your time looking at the rest of these, but that's what we're going for. So you spend your time getting your texture mapping. We've got all of these cushions correct, and then we can go ahead and import them. I would use that exercise 208 sample file that already has the sun and everything set up, and then you can do a test render of these. I'll do that in a little bit. But before we do that, I want to introduce one more little concept. I'm going to switch over back into shaded mode. And in the past, I've done curtains. And so that's certainly something that you can do. If you're interested in doing that, you can watch the previous lecture. But what I want to show you today is a drape. And this would be, a lot of times people want to do like tents or fabrics that hang naturally from 2 posts. So if I set up the control, let me start with some polylines. Let's say that I start here and I want to create a vertical line So I'll move into one of my side views here, and I want to create a vertical line that goes up maybe 10 feet. So there's a vertical line. Then if I go from that same point over, actually, let me snap to the point here. Let's go over, come on. Let's go over by 12 feet. And let's go up by 14 feet. Like that. So let me back up here. I've got this line here, and I've got this line here. Let me turn off the gumball. Let's measure the distance between these two. So if I typed in distance, I can say, what is the distance from this point to that point? And so that distance is 12'7". So if I wanted to hang a rope from this point to that point, I can do it. And if I knew the length of the rope I would want to hang, I can control what that looks like. This curve is something called a catenary curve. It's a special type of curve that forms based on gravity. Rhino has the ability to create catenary curves. So if I type catenary, I can create this. So it's going to ask first for the start of the catenary, there. It's going to ask for the end of the catenary, there. And then it's going to ask for the catenary axis direction. So this is the direction I want it to hang. I want it to hang straight down. So I'm going to snap to the bottom of one of these posts. So now it's going straight down. Then it asks for what length do you want the catenary to be? So if I did a length of exactly 12'7", it would be a straight line. But if I did a length of, say, 14 feet, and typed in 14 feet, I get a natural arc that would be as if I hung a rope from this point to that point that was 14 feet long. If the length got longer, so if I repeat the catenary from there to there, my direction is down, and the length this time is 17 feet, the rope's going to sag even more. If I went even further, so there, and this time I went at 22 feet, you can see that it keeps sagging, and you can see the shape changes as I create it. Likewise, if I did a catenary there, and there, and I did it at 13 feet, which it's going to be a very tight rope. So those all matter as you start to create like a tent. So let's create another set of points. Let's take these two and let's copy them and say maybe they're 4 feet apart here. And let's delete this one, and let's delete these two, like that. So I have this curve, this first catenary. I'm going to do a second catenary between these two. And I think this first one was 14 feet, if I'm not mistaken, 14 feet. Maybe not. There, direction, 14 feet. There it is. So I've created those two, and they're mirror images of each other. If I measure the distance between this and this, we get 4 feet. So my new catenary between here and here, my direction is going straight down. There it is. Maybe this is 4'6". I get a little loop like that. Same thing from here to there. My direction is going straight down, and this would be 4'6". This 1, 2, 3, and 4, using that curve network, which is the big takeaway command today, if you haven't figured that out, I can actually create what a piece of fabric that was cut square and 14 feet on this side and 4'6" on this side would look like if it was hanging from these 4 posts. So I can get more creative. I could change the dimensions to make it hang. I could make these further apart. So I could take these 2 points and say, you know what, let's move them a foot this way. Let's move this one a foot this way. And then I could, let's get rid of these. I could do a new set of catenaries. That could go from, whoops. Apparently I can't type catenary. That would go from here to there. My direction is down. Let's do it at, I don't know, 15 feet this time. There it is. Let's go here, there, down. Let's do this one at 14 feet. So it's a little bit different. I was trying to make those two different. And then let's go from here to there, down, and we'll say this one's at 6 feet. Oops. That's exactly 6 feet apart. So that would be why it was a straight line. There, there. Let's go down 8 feet. And so then I could do the same network surface out of this and create that style of hanging fabric. So it's just a little bit different strategy. I wanted to emphasize that today. I know we're kind of at the end of our time. If you're interested in making the curtain, the hanging curtain, you can watch one of my previous lectures because I have the curtain in that one. But I think the based on the stuff that you guys tend to create, I think this is actually a more valuable skill set to explore. So I want you today to work on creating the pillows. And if you have time, play around with this catenary. You don't really have to do any renderings with it, but I think figuring out how to create these kinds of draped surfaces is very valuable going forward. All right. Does anybody have any questions before I let you go?
I was just wondering, when do you think the video will be posted to YouTube?
I will do my very best to have it posted tonight or tomorrow morning.
Okay.
So sometimes I get distracted with other things and I forget to actually post it. I make the video, but my goal is to have it done by tonight so that it'll be uploaded at least tonight or tomorrow morning. Sometimes the links that are on the website aren't accurate, so just go to the YouTube channel and it will be there.
Okay, perfect.
And,
Professor Adams,
yes.
I was trying to download the sun and sky thing from the website. I couldn't download it on the remote desktop, so then I tried downloading it on my computer, and it wouldn't let me either.
Okay, so I'm guessing it's this problem. So if you go in Chrome, can you still see my screen okay?
Yeah.
Okay, so when I get to this file, don't click on it, right click on it and say save link as. And when you do that, well, it didn't do it for me, but generally, we'll save it here. Yeah, there you go. So I chose where to save it, and then this pops up and it says, we don't know that it's secure. If this little up facing arrow, if you click on that, there's an option to keep it, and that will force it to actually download.
Okay, I'm not using Chrome.
So I don't know why they make it so difficult to download things, but
yeah.
Yes, those are the steps required.
Okay, so I'm not using Chrome, so I'll try again to make it work. If not, is it okay if I submit my rendering without the backgrounds for this?
Yes, the background, you absolutely can do it without. The background is designed to make your life easier.
Gotcha, thank you.
We will get to it. You'll be comfortable creating it, but there's just too many options to get it set right. So rather than have you guys waste your time on that yet, it comes much later in the semester. I'm giving you this to save you time so you can concentrate on the geometry. That's my goal.
That sounds good. Thank you.
But I'm not going to penalize you if it doesn't work. The other thing is, if you need it, if you send me an email, I'll reply to it as a detachment. Don't send me a message in Canvas. Send me a direct email and I can do it that way too. Do I have any other questions?
I have a question about assignment 201.
Sure.
Do you have any recommendations? Okay, so are we supposed to build it completely by scratch or do the technique about getting the CAD blocks and then doing it that way?
You can. I'd like this to be your first real design assignment so that you can actually have some freedom with it and create something that you're excited about rather than trying to just copy what somebody else made.
Okay.
So it's designed for it to be open-ended and for you to come up with your own piece of furniture. If you want to base it on something because you're struggling to come up with a design, that's okay. I think most of the time students are excited about finally getting to do something of their own. So I'm encouraging you to do something of your own.
Okay, awesome.
All right, well, it sounds like I got through all the questions. I will see my check-ins today. First one starting in just a few minutes. So you're welcome to hang out. In the meantime, I'm going to run and take a 3-minute break, and then I'll be right back. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you for class.